Frizzle faction. In this mug, I have the names of 9 books which I have read recently. And our game today is that we will have 3 rounds of 3 books. And in each round, I have to decide which one of these books I would reread, which one I would rewrite, and which one I would recycle. Are you ready? Let's go. Kings of the Wyld. Oh, I hated that one. Singapore Sapphire. And Holmes Coming. Okay, easiest decision first. We are recycling Kings of the Wyld. So every month on my YouTube community page, there is a poll where people can vote on the books I'll read next and suggest books for next month. And that's linked in the footnotes if you would like to participate for this month. And Kings of the Wyld won for August. And I have no one to blame for this but myself because I was the one who decided to put that on the poll. But I really didn't like it. The premise of this book is that it's a Dungeons and Dragons style world where there are groups of warriors called bands, and they're pretty much revered like rock stars. And our main character was once in one of these celebrity bands, but now all the members of the band have gone their own ways and have grown old. Then one of their daughters gets in trouble and they reassemble the band to try to rescue her. So there were 2 main things about this book that didn't work for me. One was the info dumping of the world. When people say that this world is Dungeons and Dragons inspired, I was expecting that to just mean the types of creatures that were in the world. But it seemed to also carry through to the amount of unnecessary backstory that we would be info dumped. Now, I'm not hating on Dungeons and Dragons. I am a passionate Dungeons and Dragons player, and that's what this book felt like. It kept telling us about the different political histories and all these little details here and there, and I just didn't care. But then there is one more thing about this book that I think I hated even more, which was the sense of humor. If this sense of humor works for you, you're gonna love it. It really didn't work for me. Let me tell you a story. When this book was on the poll, I had a wonderfully considerate commenter tell me this. Basically, there's only 2 people who read Kings of the Wyld. People who absolutely love it and people who stop at the erection joke. And I, full of false confidence, assumed that I would be one of the people who loved it, right? I can handle some vulgar humor. It's all good. And then I actually got into this book and it's and the main entertainment value here is, in fact, from all the humor, none of which clicked with me. I didn't think any of the jokes were funny. So I ended up being the person who did not finish this book because of the jokes. Which, honestly, I'm pretty disappointed to say because I was looking forward to this one. But it just didn't work for me. Maybe it'll work for you. I rated Kings of the Wyld 1 star, and its book tone is unmellow yellow. This is a reader personality type system that I designed. Unmellow yellow means that it's an emotional book that is atmosphere focused. Okay, next, we've got Holmes Coming versus Singapore Sapphire. We're going to reread Holmes Coming. Holmes Coming is a book that feels like it was written for me. My favorite TV show is Elementary, which is a modern-day Sherlock Holmes reimagining. So if you, like me, might enjoy a modern reimagining of Sherlock Holmes with a female Watson, this book is that. But the twist is that Sherlock Holmes himself is the classic Sherlock Holmes. He got bored with the crimes of the 1800s and decided to freeze himself until present-day 2022 so that he could time travel into the future and help us solve our crimes now. And he quickly finds one in the form of a mysterious man murdered by a tiger in downtown San Francisco. So this book, the premise is a little goofy. And the execution is a blast. But the thing that I loved most about this is the heart at the center of this book, which is Holmes's journey here. In the 1800s, he was the top dog of detective work. Always the smartest man in the room. But in 2022, he's always the most ignorant person in the room, and the CSI labs don't really need him anymore. So over the course of this book of him trying to prove that he's the real Sherlock Holmes and also trying to solve this ridiculous tiger murder, he's also learning some humility and realizing that his grand plan to freeze himself into the future maybe wasn't the best idea. And the entire book is narrated by Dr. Amy Winslow, and the narration style is very reminiscent of the classic Doyle stories. But I tried to read some of the classic Doyle stories and I thought they were a little too dry. This book, not so much. So I would recommend this book to both people who are fans of classic Sherlock Holmes stories and people who aren't fans of classic Sherlock Holmes stories. Literally everyone. I rated this book 5 stars and its book tone is Celadon Green, which means intellectual and a mix of atmosphere and character focus. And then we have Rewriting Singapore Sapphire. This is a murder mystery set in 1910s Singapore. And I know exactly how I would rewrite this. I would put more Singapore in it, because all of our main characters are Europeans, mostly from the UK and some Dutch, which felt like quite a waste to me, that we set it in this awesome historical exotic environment and then it just felt almost overwhelmingly British. As a story in the backdrop of British colonialism, it's not the worst, but also don't come in here looking for themes of British colonialism because it doesn't exactly explore that. And I think this is another book that is mismatched with me. It is a New York Pink book, which means intellectual and plot-driven, and I don't always love books that are only plot-driven. I really love the meat of character arcs, and this book didn't really have any. So I guess that's my bad for assuming we would have some East Asian culture and some romance in this book, and we didn't. But if this is the kind of book that you were looking for, it was okay. I rated it 2 stars. Round 2, Migrations. Don't want to reread that one. Finlay Donovan is killing it. And Sword of Kaigen. Ah, dang it, there's 2 that I want to reread here. I guess I could no, I want to rewrite both of them as well. Okay, but definitely easy decision first. We are recycling Migrations. Migrations is a literary fiction novel about a woman who is going on a little quest to track the migration of Arctic terns, birds that migrate from the Arctic to the Antarctic every year and back again. And it's a very depressing setting because all the animal species are dying off due to climate change. And it is once again that I attempt to read a literary fiction book and then realize literary fiction really isn't for me. I just don't care enough about things like literary merit to enjoy what these books are giving, and oftentimes they're just depressing, which this book is. The main character is very much in a depressive funk. So I wanted to try out a literary fiction book to see if I'd like it this time, and I chose this one because I love Arctic terns, the bird! Where I grew up, there was a lake nearby that always had Arctic terns in the summer, and I loved bird watching them, and I'm fascinated by these long migration birds. I love the way that they flap their little wings because they're also diving birds, and it's just so impressive! So I chose the book because I thought it would have more birds, and it really didn't. Don't read this book for the birds. I rated this book 2 stars, and it is a resolution blue book, meaning it's emotional and character focused. Okay, Finlay Donovan is killing it, and Sword of Kaigen. Here's the problem. I rated these both 4 stars. I would be happy to reread both of them, but I also have ideas on how to rewrite both of them. I think I'd rather reread Finlay Donovan. Maybe not what you would expect from me who loves fantasy, but it's true. Finlay Donovan is Killing It is a book about a single mother who is a struggling novel writer. She writes novels about murder, and one day she's having brunch with her literary agent. As she discusses the plot of her upcoming book, someone overhears her and thinks that she is a contract killer assassin and hires her to kill their husband. In the beginning, Finlay does not want to become a contract killer, but she's terribly curious about the situation and keeps investigating it and gets more and more involved until things blow up. This is a very exciting book. Most people call it cozy mystery. I would call it cozy thriller because there's not much of a mystery really. But this book was definitely funny and entertaining, and I had a great time reading it, and I'm excited to read the sequel. I have an entire detailed review video of this linked in the footnotes. Which leaves us to rewrite The Sword of Kaigen. This is a fantasy book with elemental magic, and the culture is somewhat inspired by feudal Japan. And there are lots of little nitpicks I would like to rewrite about this book, but let me first talk about the things that I loved about this book. This book nails the drama of life. The drama of coming of age, of realizing your life is a lie, of investigating those lies, of a mother struggling with the 2 halves of herself, of her duty to be a housewife and her desire to be a warrior. I loved so many parts of this book. I was obsessively reading it. It was so heartbreaking and lovable, and the characters were just top tier. And if you want to hear more details about what I loved and also more details on the nitpicks that I would change, I've got a review video for The Sword of Kaigen, and I'll link that in the footnotes. But I think the biggest thing that needs to be rewritten about this is the pacing of the ending. The biggest, most dramatic moment of this book happens at around the 50% mark. And then we've got another moment closer to like 75% of this book, which could also be described as the climax, is a big emotional action moment. But then this book, to me, really feels like it overstays its welcome. And I'm left wondering if it's just because this book had too much falling action, or if it was the quality of that falling action. Like, should we just cut out a bunch of scenes from the end? Or should we just rewrite them to tie them in better with the plots of the rest of the book? Because I do feel like the ending introduces new plot lines, which, I don't like it. So if I was rewriting this book, I would make the secondary climax at 75% bigger, really devote more time of the book to building up that emotion and to wrapping it up afterwards. And then I would also cut out a lot of the new plotlines that are introduced after that climax. I rated The Sword of Kaigen 4 stars, and it is a jade green book, meaning emotional and a mix of atmosphere and character focus. But before we get to round 3, we've got our dishonorable mentions, which are books that I gave up on so fast that I don't feel like I know them well enough to give a coherent review for them. We've got Bravely, one of my most anticipated books, a sort of sequel book to one of my favorite movies, Brave. And the reason that I didn't finish this one is that I felt like the character development setup was more contrived than actual flaws that the characters needed to overcome. And The Dragon's Promise, sequel to Six Crimson Cranes, which is a middle grade fantasy book, kind of Asian inspired as the name suggests, with lots of dragons. And this one I didn't like because I felt like the writing was too sparse. Like we didn't get enough scene setup or character setup or emotion setup or plot setup. And Empire of the Vampire. I had heard from some people that this book felt very literary and kind of pompous, and I had heard from other people that this book felt a little crude and wild. And I was kind of hoping that those two vibes, neither of which I really love, would balance each other out as they're kind of opposites, but they didn't. They were just kind of coexisting, and I hated both of the vibes of this book. And those are the 3 dishonorable mentions. Now we get to round 3. Wait. Why am I shuffling these? There's only 3 left. Terciel and Elinor, Hate Machine, and Sweetwater and The Witch. I don't want to reread any of these. What is the easiest decision here? I would rewrite Terciel and Elinor. Terciel and Elinor is a prequel to the Sabriel series, a series which I love, and I kind of want to reread to see if I'll love it as much now as I did when I read it many years ago. And the thing is, the 2 title characters, Terciel and Elinor, are the parents of the main character Sabriel in the main series books. So this book is them meeting and falling in love and also battling a zombie crime lord person. But here's the disappointing thing about this book, is that from the cover, from the name, from the synopsis, this book is a romance. Yes, a romance with action in it, but it should be a fantasy romance. That's kind of the core of the appeal of this book. However, did it feel like a romance? No. Terciel and Elinor spent most of the book apart, and then when they were finally reunited, the romance just kind of fell together and suddenly they were a couple. And I didn't really understand why they even made a good couple. This was really more focused on their individual coming of ages and also battling the zombie lord. So if I was rewriting this, I would focus a lot more on the times when they were actually together and really crafting why they belong together, why they make a good team, what they see in each other, and also drawing out the conflict that they come from 2 different worlds. One of them is very much part of the magical world, and one of them is very much part of the non-magical world. And I would have that tension more between them so we could have something for their relationship to overcome. I rated Terciel and Elinor 3 stars, and it is Xanthus Orange, meaning intellectual, and a mix of plot and atmosphere focus. Then, Hate Machine versus Sweetwater and The Witch. I guess I would rather read Hate Machine. This is the latest book in the Eric Carter series, which is a dark urban fantasy series starring a necromancer. And lots of urban fantasy series have a flavor of noir in them. That's just kind of part of the genre sometimes. But these books go in full on the noir, on the darkness. Over the course of the series, our protagonist does not become more heroic. In a lot of ways, he becomes more villainous. And yes, he levels up and gets more powers, but he also gets more problems. And would I want to reread this book? No, I like my books a little bit more fun. But of all the books I picked out for this round, this is the one I would most want to reread because it was intriguing and well written, and I did appreciate the hardcore commitment to the vibes. I rated Hate Machine 3 stars, and it is a International Orange book, which leaves me recycling Sweetwater and The Witch. So this one, it's a paranormal romance, probably. And the reason that this book irked me was the messy world building. For example, one of the conflicts of this book is that our heroine is a witch, and witches are not always liked in this society. But it's totally fine in this society if you have paranormal or psychic powers, just not witch powers. And did this book help me understand the difference between the hated magic powers and the not hated paranormal powers? No. Did this book help me understand really at all how any of those paranormal powers were working? Also, no. But was the romance good? It was okay. I think where it excelled was helping me understand why our hero and heroine would do well together, why they make an awesome team, why they are like puzzle pieces that fit together and make a power couple. Honestly, this book and Terciel and Elinor have like the exact opposite problems. Because Terciel and Elinor, great world building, the romance, not the best. This book, the world building, not the best. The romance, pretty good. So if you're not bothered by messy world building and you're just looking for a fast, interesting romance, it's okay. But for me, I don't really have any interest in rereading this book, and so we will recycle it. Hopefully to end up on someone else's shelves who can love it more. And those are the last 9 books I read. The best of all of them definitely being Holmes Coming. So if you want to leave me an emoji in the comments, give me a magnifying glass for Sherlock Holmes. And please chat with me down there. Have you read any of these books? What do you think of them? Subscribe for more videos on Frizzle Fridays, and thank you for watching.